I'm Master Peter C. Brusso, and what you're going to learn today is some really simple disarms that you can use as a shooter, as a person that carries a gun. It's very important to be able to understand that if your gun jams or you run out of ammunition, what you can do to help disarm the other person, and that's going to be today's episode. Super simple, super easy, same disarm with many of the same stuff. So first, let's talk about the physics of disarms. Okay, well, let's take a look at a machete, for example. Just this will help us understand what torque is. Torque is actually force times distance. How much force you actually put on something and the distance from the place you're putting it on. So if I actually push on a tool close, I can feel it, but it isn't powerful. But the further out I go, then I can't start to hold it. Now, I'm going to use Matthias to show this as well. All right, so here the disarm goes, for example, if this was happening. As I start to push on this, Matthias, hold as tight as you can, he can actually start to really hold that. And I'm really pushing right about there. But as I come out to here, there's just no way he's going to be able to hold that weapon. Okay? So when we do our disarms, you can kind of see how that starts to break out very nicely. I don't want to be up close. Hold on tight. When I get out here, I got all that leverage, all that natural leverage, and oh my gosh, look what happens. You're right at his neck. He can break elbows, smash him in the head, all kinds of cool stuff. So the physics again are, the closer I am to his hand with the same amount of force, it doesn't do much. The further out I am with the same amount of force, it does a lot of work for you. So you always want to remember that's part of the physics. The second thing to talk about physics in particular, on a slide of a gun, it goes 300 miles an hour, but it really doesn't hurt your hand. I was always trained never to do that. So here's the gun and a slide. I was always taught never to touch the slide. Well, it turns out that actually isn't quite true. I can touch a slide, even though the slide moves at 300 miles an hour. It's very interesting. If you hold it with a slide and it fires and it does slide between your fingers, the interior mechanisms are still working. They're jamming that round up in there, but the slide gets stuck. It actually jams the weapon. It's kind of cool. So exhaust ports are something to be wary of, but when you're pushing, you can kind of see that the slide would be moving along my hand, or if I'm cupping it, I don't want to grab completely like that. Allow that slide to move its way along. So when you're going to do a disarm, physics tells us we don't want to grab close here, we want to grab way out here, and it makes it very easy. We use torque and leverage about that hand. The other thing is, universal law of escape says that this weapon has to come out between his fingers and his thumb. So if you notice most of our disarms, that's exactly what starts to happen. Boom, it pops right out between his fingers and his thumb. That's the other very big key thing about the physics of disarms. That has to happen. That concludes the physics part that you need to understand. Let's talk about weapons laws. The philosophy of weapons laws is if that's a gun, I want to close the distance. If that was a knife, I want to open the distance. And the reason why is I want him to make a committed attack towards me so I can get a hold of that hand, or I can start to work on it with a knife, but I don't want to be so close that he can cut me, because the knife is a close-in weapon. So I'm going to take his disadvantage away until he makes the committed attack, and then I can make a committed defense against that. If we're back to a gun is a long-range weapon, and if I'm halfway down the hill, he can just sit and shoot me all day. I've got to close the distance until I'm inside of his ability to actually understand what's happening in his brain. His physiology works against him because he doesn't have enough time to pull the trigger because he doesn't expect anything. So that's the first part of gun and knife philosophy you need to understand very closely. The next piece are the 4 weapons laws, and they are very, very important to understand. The first weapons law says I have to clear the angle of attack of the weapon. I want to get out of the way. The second law says I have to control the weapon so it can't be pointed back at me. Second law. Third law says I have to disarm that weapon. Simple disarm. Fourth law, this is where you have to have some real discretion for yourself, says I need to neutralize that opponent. Doesn't say I have to shoot him. I could hit him in the head. I could break his teeth. I could knock him out. That's neutralization. Or I can tap, rack, and neutralize him as need be. It's your call. That's the ethics and judgment call that you're going to have to take. But those are the 4 weapons laws that you have to worry about when you're going to be taking care of weapons. Now let's get right into techniques, shall we?